"Spirit?" said Scrooge, with an interest he had never felt before. "Tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see a vacant seat," replied the ghost, "in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch that another carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die." "No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind spirit. Say he will be spared. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race," returned the ghost, "would find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population." Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief. "Man," said the ghost, "if man you be in heart, not a demon, who bear that wicked count until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is, will you decide what man shall live, what man shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. O God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust." Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, and trembling cast his eyes upon the ground. But he raised them speedily, on hearing his own name. "Mr. Scrooge," said Bob, "I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast." "The founder of the feast, indeed," cried Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. "I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it." "My dear," said Bob, "the children, Christmas Day." "It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure," said she. "Oh, which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge? You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow." "My dear," was Bob's mild answer, "Christmas Day. I'd drink his health for your sake and the day's," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Not for this. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt." The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness. Tiny Tim drank at last it all, and he didn't care twopence for it. Scrooge was the augury of the family, The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, from the mere relief of Scrooge the Baleful being done with. Bob Cratchit told them how he held a station in his eye for Master Peter, which would bring in, if obtained, for 5 and 6 pence weekly. The two young Cratchits laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter's being a man of business, and Peter himself looked thoughtfully at the fire from between his collars, as if he were deliberating what particular investments he should favor when he came into the receipt of what bewildering income. Mother, who was a poor apprentice at a milliner's, then told them what kind of work she had to do and how many hours she worked at the stretch, and how she meant to lie abed tomorrow morning for a good long rest. Tomorrow being a holiday, she passed at home. Also how she had seen a countenance and a Lord some days before, and how the Lord was much about as tall as Peter, and which Peter pulled up his collar so high that you couldn't have seen his head if you had been there. All this time, the chestnuts and the jug went round and round, and by and by they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice and sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being weatherproof. The clothes was scanty, and Peter might have known, and very likely did, the inside of palm breakers, but they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded and looked happy yet in the bright sprinkles of the Spirit's touch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon him, and especially on Tiny Tim, and to the last. By that time it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily, and as Scrooge and the Spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in the kitchens, parlors, and all those rooms was wonderful. Here, the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner with the hard players They came through and through before the fire, and deep red curtains, ready to be drawn to shut out the cold and darkness. There all the children of the house were running into the snow to meet the married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and be the first to greet them. Here again were shadows on the window blind of ghosts assembling, and there a group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur-booted, and all chattering at once, tripped lightly up to some near neighbor's house, where flew upon the single man who saw them enter, and for witches. Well, they knew it, and aglow. But if you had judged from the numbers of people on their way to friendly gatherings, you might have thought that no one was at home to give them welcome when they got there, instead of every house expecting company, and piling up its fires half chimney high. Let's sing on it how the ghosts exulted, how it bared its broad outburst, and opened its capacious palm, and flirted on, and holding with a generous hand, as bright and harmless mirth of everything within his reach. The very lamplighter who ran on before to turn the dusky street were the specks of light, and who was dressed to span the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirit passed. Little canned the lamplighter that he had any company but Christmas.